As part of our continuing Yahoo Finance Back to School series, we're thrilled to have spoken with the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, earlier. The Secretary says everybody wins with the Biden administration's new student loan relief plan. Well, one superintendent in the Secretary's home state of Connecticut told me he voted for President Biden, but he's disappointed with this policy because he worked 2 jobs, saving every penny to pay back his loans. I asked the Secretary how he and millions of others like him do win with this student loan relief plan.
It's disappointing if a superintendent is not seeing that, helping people who are struggling right now, that are getting out of a pandemic, people who make under $75,000 who are going to benefit, get their feet back under them so they can buy homes and continue with their lives. That's a benefit to the whole economy. We anticipated that there was going to be a spike in defaults when loan payments started. So we're thrilled that we're preventing that for millions of Americans, and that's helping the local economy too. And, the goal of this is to really address the impact of the pandemic. We don't want folks to come out worse off now than they were before the pandemic. That's why we made this targeted relief of up to $20,000 in loan relief for folks who are eligible for Pell. It's a game changer, but we're also fixing the income-driven repayment program, which is going to help borrowers for generations.
You and the president spoke about the underlying problem here, which is the rising cost of college far outpacing inflation. What are you doing to address that?
Yeah, and I appreciate that being brought up because, look, loan relief by itself is not going to help in the long run, right? We want to make sure we're providing loan relief, but we're not in the same position 5 years from now. We're fixing public service loan forgiveness, we're fixing income-driven repayment, but we're also increasing accountability on colleges to provide a good return on investment. The costs have gone out of control, and for so many talented Americans, they're thinking college is out of reach. And honestly, there's so many more options. We're going to improve career pathways. So colleges need to be on board providing a better return on investment to students. So we're increasing our college accountability. We have the college scorecard that we've enhanced to make sure parents could see whether or not when they're looking at a school that they're not just looking at the shiny flyers, they're looking at the graduation rate. They're looking at the typical jobs that students get when they graduate from those colleges. We want to inform parents with knowledge, students with knowledge, to make sure those institutions that are of value for education are the ones that we're looking at.
You spoke about how this plan improves the economy. Not everyone in your own party agrees with that. Former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, as well as Obama top economic advisor Jason Furman, said this dramatically worsens the inflation problem. How worried are you that it could also worsen the economy?
I don't agree with them. Look, this president, first of all, with the Inflation Reduction Act, is anticipated that $300 billion will be reduced from the deficit, okay? So now we have targeted loan relief to people that are more likely to default if they didn't have this, which worsens the economy. Now, we have to keep in mind, folks that are making over $125,000 are not going to see loan relief. So they're going to start making payments very soon on their loans, which will reduce the risk of inflation. So it really does offset. And, it's not just, don't take our word for it. Folks like Moody's have also said the same thing. So we do believe that this is the right thing to do for Americans that are struggling, who need a little bit support so they can get back on their feet post-pandemic.
Of course, the biggest problem facing our schools right now for millions of parents like yourself is the teacher shortage. Not entirely clear how many we're short, but Nevada says they're several thousand short. Florida says they're several thousand short. This is a problem that was exacerbated by the pandemic, but certainly predates it. To you, a former teacher, what's the root of the problem?
I was a former teacher, but also school principal, is trying to fill in those classrooms when I was short teachers in bilingual education, special education. I'll tell you, the teacher shortage issue is a symptom of the teacher respect issue in this country. All right. Thankfully, right now, we have the American Rescue Plan, right? And we're telling districts and states to use those dollars to incentivize teachers in their districts, to provide bonuses to keep teachers on, or signing bonuses, to bring retired teachers who have years of experience back into the classroom without impacting their benefits, their retirement benefits. You can do that. You can do that now for short-term fix. But in the long term, we have to create grow your own programs. We have to make sure we're tapping on our on our students and our para-educators so they see themselves as teachers of tomorrow. Use the American Rescue Plan dollars to create pipeline programs. That's what it's there for. We're encouraging that. But let's lift up the respect in this profession. That's teachers need a competitive salary. They need better working conditions, and they need their voice to be heard when they're talking about reimagining schools post-pandemic.
Mr. Secretary, you know, studies have also shown students are up to a year behind because of the COVID pandemic. And now you have school districts in Texas limiting weeks to 4 days. Sounds obvious, but what's the impact on students?
Significant. And again, that's an example of, in my opinion, just lack of valuing education. We should be doubling, not making less. Texas probably got the most. Maybe Texas or California got the most money from the federal government in the American Rescue Plan to get hire teachers, to hire tutors, mentors. Kids need more, not less. And I think until we respect our educators, respect the education and what it means for our country, we're going to have these problems. So, going down to 4 days to me is further disservice to students that have already been impacted significantly by the pandemic.
So the other tactic is lowering the requirements. We're seeing that in Arizona where they're allowing college students to teach. We're seeing in Florida where they're encouraging veterans to do so. And the governor has said that standards are too rigid. Do you agree?
Another example, our kids need more, not less. And if your idea is lowering standards to become a teacher, then you're part of the problem.
Nice to have the Education Secretary on Yahoo Finance again as part of our Back to School series. That last point about lowering standards, Shauna, to go into the teaching profession, I'm not sure it's not being hijacked by some. Look, there might be tremendous teachers available without a teaching degree. Maybe the way we evaluate someone's readiness to join that teaching profession, as I've spoken to principals around the country, they'll tell you quietly that some of the most experienced teachers are not necessarily the best. They're just tenured and protected. Young, eager college students might be an answer, at least in the state of Texas, because 4-day weeks are devastating on our children who are already behind.
Exactly. It comes at a time when we are coming out of the pandemic. So many students haven't been attending school on a regular basis over the last 2 years, so clearly far behind. But what he was saying about incentivizing teachers to get back into the classroom, it's time that there is a little bit more action on this. Yes, we're seeing teachers take action. We had the biggest strike, or the strike of the biggest school district in Ohio, in Columbus. They were making demands, and the demands that they wanted were a lot of the issues that we just heard from the secretary. They wanted higher pay. They wanted improvements in terms of working conditions. Their concerns was about adequate heating and air conditioning in the classroom. Class sizes are simply too big because there aren't enough teachers in that school district. So certainly this sheds a light on a problem that has been in the works for years, something that we have been tracking, and the pandemic clearly, Rochelle, making this crisis severely worse.
I mean, obviously, even before the pandemic, as Dave was saying there, you have teachers who are sort of coming out of pocket, paying for their own things, already having a struggle. A lot of teachers were very put off. They were being very undervalued, especially when you look at some of the other careers that obviously earn a higher salary. I think the respect issue that the secretary mentioned is important because you want to be respected in your profession, and there are these incentives for a lot of new teachers coming in, but then for existing teachers, they're probably thinking, well, what about us? A lot of these things that we're going on strike for, we're not getting them, but some of these newer teachers coming in are getting those incentives. Hopefully we see some balance, because obviously, I mean, teachers are the lifeblood. I mean, what are we going to do if our children aren't being taught? So hopefully we get to see more action on that soon.
We should mention a very intriguing piece in the Atlantic right now. Recommend you read it. That says there is not, in fact, a national teacher shortage. They point out these shortages have existed for years, well before the pandemic, and there's no national database tracking the amount of teachers we have, which might be the first problem the Education Secretary needs to fix. I can't help but wonder if $500 billion to erase student loan debt wouldn't be better spent on improving our high schools, our grade schools, and hiring teachers.
Yeah, you raise a good point. We are going to continue to cover this subject. We know it's so important to so many of our viewers. So coming up next hour, we will be speaking with Becky Pringle, the president of the National Education Association. So be sure to stick around for that.